So I'm going to cover kind of the installation of our Trello application, our version 2. Now what I'm going to cover is in essence basically what you'll find in our configuration or installation configuration guide that's part of our application. You'll find this in the ServiceNow store. You can download the install and configuration guide, but I'm going to walk you through kind of the steps here. So the first thing worth noting is in order to install our application, there are a few plugins that you need to activate beforehand that are dependency plugins for our application. And they're listed here. They kind of go in order in that you have the Scrum plugin, you need to activate that, the Release plugin, you need to activate that, and these are listed in the document. There is an advanced kind of this agile development or the Scrum kind of advanced features. And then we do use the service portal for the kind of console and the interface parts of our management interface. So that needs to be activated as well. And once that's done and you've gone and you've basically purchased the application through the store and become entitled, you should see the application available in your download section of System Applications Applications section. When I do install, it's going to basically go through and do the installation activity. Alright, so now you'll notice I have this is fully installed, and if I were to get updates to the application, they would show up here in the updates section. I get a little badge that would say there's a new update. So if we push something new about the application, this is where you would go to actually apply that update. Alright, so now that I've done the install, I have my application menu over here for the Trello integration. Really where I'm going to start, I'm just going to kind of hide the development components. I'm not going to actually do any development changes, though there are widgets and code you can change and adapt to meet your needs if need be, though we don't necessarily think you need to do those things. So I'm going to open the management console. This is a good place to start in terms of connecting. Now I'm already logged into my Trello instance, but you don't have to be. You could be, when you do this connection and establishing or sharing your kind of credential information, you will get prompted to log in. So when I first come to this page, it'll basically say it's currently not set up. And part of this is I need to provide a couple things. So first of all, I have to get a Trello API key. When I click this, it's going to take me to Trello, and if I am logged in, it's going to show me my API key. If I'm not logged in, I'll have to log in to get this. All right, so I get this, then I can go to my integration settings, and I have to be in context of the application to make this change, so I'm going to click here to edit this record. And I'm going to enter the API key here and save that. So you basically just need one API key to connect to the Trello, and then there's a user specific token that gets generated and gets used with your particular account. And so in this case, basically I've already kind of connected it. It logged me in, generated a token for me. Now just to show you that if I were if I didn't have a token stored in my preference, so I can kind of clear this. So if I have the API key specified but I don't have the token specified, you'll get a screen that looks kind of like this where it says it's not set up. It'll have the API key kind of specified but no user token generated for you as a logged on user. So you can click here and do generate a token. Say I want to connect to Trello, allow this. Then what's going to happen is it's going to connect, establish that connection, and then store your token information within your user profile. So the next time you come to connect, it's going to reuse that information continuously. So as far as the kind of dashboard here, you'll see some stats information about kind of what's been imported from Trello today, what's been pushed out to Trello, things that are currently pending, and these are linkable to go see what's in action. Then I get a list of my various boards out here. I can filter these. I can say I only want to show, or I want to include ones that have been that are closed, which means they're no longer actively being worked in Trello. I can also filter by those that are already linked to a ServiceNow release versus those that are unlinked, and kind of filter those two out. I'm just going to leave all here for now, which kind of gives you my starting list here. And then when I do view all, it's going to give me kind of the same screen where I'm going to get kind of a list of those records. Ultimately, notice I can also here, I can create a new Trello board if I wanted to. Just kind of go create something new in Trello and then link it to a ServiceNow release. So I have a couple ways of kind of establishing these linkages. So let's just take one of these for example. We'll go this route. So this one I've already got a number of cards out in Trello. I can open this into kind of the Trello interface and see my various cards, but it's kind of giving me a view over here of that. It's giving me a view of some of my additional information of who the members are, my various lists. And then when I go to link this to a release, it's going to give me a list of the various releases inside of ServiceNow that I can link to. Now, so I have a couple ways I can do this. I can do this and link to these original ones, or I can go the other way, which is to start with a release record. So I can go and create a new release here. So I'm just going to go create a new release. I'm going to call this kind of the same as my board in Trello. I'm going to call this Test App Release Version 1. Here is some additional details about this release. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I think one thing I want to highlight with this, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new story out here for this release. So I can have cards in Trello already established. I can have stories already established inside of ServiceNow, and they're going to, on linking the two together, they're going to kind of push each other from one to the next. I'll create a new story here for this release. I'll just say test story within ServiceNow on May 25th, just so I can have some differences here. So that's already set up. So now I got a release. One thing I wanted to show is you'll see an option here to link to a Trello board. When I do this, it's going to launch this interface, right? So when I go to pick the ServiceNow release, now what's happening is the two are getting linked together. Now one thing I'll highlight here, there's a message at the top that says setting needs to be completed. So basically right now nothing's being shared between these two records, between Trello and the ServiceNow release record, until I complete this step. So in this step that I need to complete is kind of complete the information here on the right by defining what are the different lists inside of Trello. So these are these swim lanes here, right? And then how do they match up with the story kind of stages. So I can say this matches up with to do, this is a doing, maybe this is a doing, and this is a done and a done. And again, I can define my different Trello lists to kind of match maybe more closely to these different stages, but in this case I only have 3 lists, so I'm just kind of making the best match. So once I do that, now what's going to happen, I'm going to have a new tab here for kind of activity. I can see first of all that it's got that story that I created in ServiceNow has been kind of queued up to push to Trello. And so this is going to happen kind of behind the scenes. It's also going to go start pushing, pulling the various cards from Trello into ServiceNow. Now while that's working, let me show you kind of where this, or what's kind of triggering those activities. So you'll see under this Trello there's a scheduled job. There's one out here that you mostly need to know, which is this sync data one. So this one runs on a minute interval to kind of wake up and get updates from the Trello boards. And it's primarily looking at it's running every minute, but it's looking at if the activity has changed on the board from the last time it was processed or read. So it's looking at it all the time, every minute, but it's only pulling in stuff that it detects as being changed or modified. And then the stuff on the outbound, it actually uses anything pushed out from ServiceNow to Trello gets staged in this outbound events table. You'll see it in kind of initially a pending status and then a process status. Each one of these records has also will log kind of messages related to how it's processed and whether it was failed or successful, or additional messages kind of get pushed into here. And so now let's go back to this. This guy is now linked. So when I come in here, you'll see my activity. I'll see that it's finished that activity. It's also pulled down a number of stories for our cards from Trello and created those as stories inside of ServiceNow. So now if I come over here, I should see, if I do May 25th, I have my new card that I just created out here that's probably on the bottom of my list down here. It is. Test story within that. Also, when I go to the release record in ServiceNow, we'll now see there's a number of stories that have been created out here. All right, so what you'll find too is if I go into these records and now I go to change this, move this to a state of, let's just say, work in progress. Here is acceptance criteria, and also put in, here is a new work note. So when I make an update like this, we'll see this activity update, and you'll notice there's kind of 3 different staged activities. And the way the integration with Trello works is that each of these kind of attributes of a card record kind of need to be posted to or put to kind of separately. So there's separate activities to change the state or the list in which it's in, another one to change or add a comment to it, one to add kind of a description. While it's doing this, I also want to highlight a couple things here. We did create a API Explorer. So you'll see under the API Explorer, there's ways to kind of do searches in context to a particular board. So I can run this and kind of see what the responses are. We also did kind of bundle some common kind of queries or API calls you might want to, or that you might want to interrogate or look at. Like this one goes out and gives me my particular boards. You can also, if you were to add parameters, edit this. You can see there's a link to the API to give you more documentation of how that works. You can save this and kind of create your own version of it, which is going to have kind of two different versions out here. My version versus the default kind of thing, right? And there's also, you'll see records here for doing creations of boards to test those things out, create a card. So you can do some testing of the interface and the API kind of with this Explorer. So just to highlight here, right, so now if I were to come back to, here's that story we just moved, it just got moved to this doing stage. The acceptance criteria gets appended to the description. The comments get written here. And the same thing would happen if I were to add a comment. And that's going to get pushed back into Trello. So that's kind of the gist of kind of how it moves. There is also worth noting a couple things here. So if I were to take a story here, and I won't go through the full the actions, but if I were to move this to, say, a different board, if that other board is also linked to a ServiceNow release, it will move that the ServiceNow story from that one release to the other. If it's not released to the or it's not part of that ServiceNow release, then it will move it to kind of a canceled kind of state, or kind of remove it from that particular, actually remove it from that release and basically leave it as a story that doesn't have an associated release to it. So it doesn't delete it, but kind of disassociates it with that release and doesn't have a place to put it because it doesn't know what ServiceNow release record to store it under. Same thing if I were to archive one of these cards, it would kind of do the same thing and kind of disassociate it on the ServiceNow side. Last thing I'll highlight too, so if you have other users that are coming in who aren't, if they aren't the user that's integrated to service or that isn't tied to the token or aren't a user account in Trello, and they update these stories, it'll still push, basically it'll push the updates from ServiceNow to Trello, kind of using the credentials of that user that established the linkage between those releases. So basically it'll try to use the token of the user if it can, but if it can't, then it'll use basically the token of the user that established the linkage between the ServiceNow release and the board. So it'll allow those exchange of information, but it kind of does it through an impersonated kind of model. The other thing I just highlight real quickly, if you have issues or challenges with our app, there is a contact support section. So this gives you an ability where you can submit a defect enhancement question. And the way this works, let's call this a question. You submit this, you'll get your kind of ticket number. You'll see your question over here. Once they're closed, you can also kind of show your closed ones over here. Then you can kind of also click on these to see where they're at in the process. Your updates will be on the left, our updates will be on the right as we move things along. You also have the option here to cancel this if you've got it working or you resolved your own issue or don't have the question anymore that you wanted to ask. And that'll then move this to kind of a completed status. So that covers what I wanted to cover today. I hope that was helpful in terms of being able to see our application and kind of how it works. Thank you very much.